Hello and welcome back to another video. As promised, today I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite plant-based recipes. The 4 recipes that I chose, I specifically chose them because they're really easy to add or remove ingredients, and I know a lot of people don't like mushrooms. Some people are trying to cut back on soy, so they're really nice. You can substitute anything you want. You can remove whatever you want, which also means that if you were not plant-based like me, but you're a runner, you can add your favorite protein, remove whatever if you don't want it. On that note, I am also training for a marathon, and these are meals that I eat pretty frequently throughout my marathon training because they're pretty balanced and they honestly just taste really good. After I did my weight loss journey a few years ago, I refused to eat nasty, bland food. So it's really important to me as a plant-based gal and just as somebody who likes to eat well to make sure that my food tastes good and is seasoned, and I'm going to show that throughout the video as well. So the first recipe I want to go over with you guys is this rice bowl. I love this rice bowl. I could probably eat it every day, and I do eat it at least 3 or 4 times a week. This is one of my favorite meals, and for this recipe you're going to need rice, oyster mushrooms, avocado, and kimchi, or really any fermented food will do. Oyster mushrooms are really the star of the show for this meal. They hold onto a lot of flavor and add a really beautiful texture to the bowl. Mushrooms tend to be pretty dirty, so I make sure I wash them really well before peeling them into pieces and starting to cook them. You can season these to taste, but I really like to do this blended Indian seasoning, onion powder, and salt. I cook the oyster mushrooms for about 8 minutes or until they get a little bit crispy on one side, and then remove them and add my rice. I prep this rice prior so it's already cooked, but adding it to the pan that I use for the mushrooms gives it a little bit more flavor. For the assembly, I add the rice to the bowl with the mushrooms, cut my avocado, and then I add kimchi, pickled beets, and pickled onions. This recipe is colorful and full of fiber, which is one of the reasons that I love it so much, but that's pretty much it for this recipe. This rice bowl took me 15 minutes to make, but it was only because the rice was already prepped, so I kind of just had to cook it up really quickly. So as you'll see throughout most of this video, I frequently eat a lot of fermented foods. My thing with my gut health is that I was trying to find things that worked, and a lot of times, like, I tried green juice and it just did not do it for me. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people were telling me to try, like, eat actual food for your gut. So I started doing fermented foods and it has saved my life, I swear. So I did use a little bit more fermented food in this meal than I normally do, but I really loved it and it tastes so good. I will say for this recipe, one of the really big things that I would substitute if you wanted to add more protein is beans. This recipe is really good. However, it's not fully balanced. It does have fats, it has carbs, it has a lot of fiber, but there's really not a lot of protein. There's probably almost none in this one. So if you wanted to add protein, add some beans. Personally, I think I was eating this before or after a run and I had a protein shake prior. So I was like, I'm gonna eat a pretty big protein heavy dinner, so I didn't want to add a crazy amount, and I also just wasn't really that hungry. Sometimes when I add like tofu or a heavy protein shake with a meal, I feel like I just stuff myself, and that's never my goal. So I would add some beans to this one if you want to add protein, and let's look at the next video. This next recipe is an avocado toast with a tofu scramble. You'll need bread, I prefer sourdough, tofu, microgreens, and avocado. I usually press my tofu just to get a little bit of the moisture out, and to get it to that scrambled egg texture, I just squeeze it in the bag that it's in. I love this recipe because I can cook everything in one pan, so I make my toast and start on the scramble. For the tofu scramble, I do salt, onion powder, white pepper, and paprika, and I just cook the tofu until it's mostly free of moisture. Once everything is done cooking, I add my avocado and tofu to the toast. I also wanted some bite to this, so I added pickled beets and then topped it with my microgreens. I just paired this with a matcha, and this was actually such a perfect meal, and it just made me really happy because I love the color green, but I love this meal and I could probably eat it every day. This avocado toast took me only 15 minutes to make, and it was really easy to put together, honestly. I know avocado toast has been shoved down all of our throats for the longest time, but I swear I love this avocado toast. It's so good. The tofu adds a good amount of protein to it, but if I want to add extra protein, I'll do a protein shake with this. And because it's just one piece of avocado toast, a protein shake with it is kind of the perfect pair. It fills me up just enough, and this is usually something that I'll eat after a run. I try not to eat anything super heavy before I go on a run, so I would not usually eat this ahead of time. You'll also notice a theme. I usually have like some kind of drink with all of my meals, and this one was matcha. I love matcha. I love it so much. I don't know what it is. I'm just a green girl. I like matcha. I love my avocado toast. I love my little micro greens and all that stuff, but it's just kind of nice to me. I feel like it's kind of a ritualistic thing for me because I got sober a couple of years ago. I try to have these like sweet little drinks that kind of make me feel very cutesy. So yeah, that matcha was delicious too. I swear, matcha is another thing that I could probably have every day. But on to the next. Of all the recipes I made, this was probably the most annoying to film. My potato peeler lost its blade, my oven would not preheat, and I burned myself when it finally did, but it was worth it by the end because it was so good. For this recipe, you need sweet potato, quinoa, and avocado, which is one of the reasons I really like this recipe because it's very simple. A lot of times I'll meal prep the ingredients for this and then set them inside of my fridge for later in the week, so if I need something to eat really quickly, I can just kind of assemble this on the go. I have never found the perfect temperature to cook sweet potato, so I just throw it in the oven and hope for the best. For quinoa, I cook it the same way I cook rice, so a 2-to-1 ratio and season to taste. Once I assembled everything, I topped this with some rice seasoning and surprise, surprise, some kimchi. I just paired this with a nice cup of tea and it was the perfect little meal. I love sweet potatoes. They're so filling, they're so satiating, and if I could eat them with every meal, I would, but they do overstuff me sometimes, so I try not to eat them with every meal or even every day. So with this meal specifically, there is protein in quinoa, which kind of makes me feel like it's super balanced. I think there's like 7 to 12 grams of protein per serving of quinoa, so if you wanted to add a protein shake or something else with this, that would be a great option to just add some extra protein if you want it, but I could probably just eat this most nights and I feel good with it. This is another meal that I usually eat after a run. Pre-run is pretty much the same thing, which is one of the reasons that I didn't want to film what I eat before a run, because I literally eat a bowl of oatmeal with maple syrup and almonds before every single one of my runs, and maybe I'll eat a banana, but these are all my post-run meals. Again, I try to keep them as balanced as possible. The other reason that I love these meals is because if you want, you can eat them for lunch or dinner. Most of these I will swap around all week and I'll eat them either way. So yeah, this is one of those things too that's really nice to meal prep. Again, you guys know how I feel about meal prep, okay? But I will prep quinoa a couple of days in advance, rice, and then ingredients so I can kind of combine them. This meal did take me 30 minutes to make because I had to make the sweet potatoes and the quinoa, but this is one of those where I'll have leftovers, so if I cook it ahead of time, I'll have some to eat the next day. But yeah, I love quinoa. It's one of those things where you have to know how to cook it correctly, because I used to cook it like just with water and it tasted like ass, okay? This is another one of those where you can swap things out if you don't like certain ingredients that are in it. It's really easy. Again, I think the big thing with plant-based eating is making sure that you have the correct ingredients, and I always say that you need to have a base. So for me, my base is usually carbs because I'm training for a marathon, and even if I wasn't training for a marathon, you need carbs. Carbs are good for you, carbs are not bad for you. Okay, there are some carbs that are bad for you, but we don't need to get into that conversation right now, okay? So let's get into the last thing, which is the sandwich. This last meal is one of my favorites, but I cannot lie, it is not my recipe, it is my wife's. So I asked her to join me for this so she didn't think I was claiming it as my own. But she's also a chef, so she cooks a lot faster than I do. For this sandwich, you'll need bread, tofu, green pepper, onion, tomato, and cornstarch to fry the tofu. She started by prepping all the veggies to cook while I stood there for emotional support before starting the bread. This meal is very flavorful on its own, so she just added salt and pepper to the veggies. For the tofu, you're going to want firm or extra firm tofu so it keeps its shape, and we just coat this in cornstarch so it gets a nice little crisp. There is a very specific order that the sandwich is layered for maximum flavor, so follow this to the T. If we ever open a cafe, this is going to be the star of the show, so just give us a few years and you too can have a Rebecca ×2 creation because we have the same name. I love this sandwich. This sandwich is so good. However, it is probably the longest thing to make on this entire video. It takes a long time to get all of the ingredients prepped for this for some reason, and you would think it would be just as quick as the avocado toast, but because we fry the tofu, it just takes a lot longer. I will say that this is probably the longest to make and probably a little bit more unhealthy than some of the other ones because we do use a good amount of oil in the pan to fry it. If you wanted to, you could just throw this in the air fryer. It'll still crisp up. So if you're trying to cut back on calories or you don't want a crazy amount of oil in your tofu, put it in the air fryer. That's what I used to do when I was just in a calorie deficit. But now that I'm training for a marathon, I eat whatever I want. Okay, so I fry my tofu. But also, I think that there's just something about cooking with people that you love that makes the food just taste so much better. And I'm one of those people where I like bantering and kind of going back and forth and talking about the food. My wife is also a chef, if I haven't already said it a million times. So it's nice to have her in the kitchen because I really didn't know how to cook for a long time. And she taught me pretty much everything that I know, including with ingredients, including with prepping, including with how to cook rice, which I didn't know for a long time. So it's really nice to be able to get into the kitchen with her and have her teach me things that I didn't know. But also then I just feel like I got a lesson from a chef. So now you guys kind of got a lesson from a chef. So you're welcome. Those are my favorite recipes. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you love them. I hope you try them. And I hope you let me know if you like them. I also picked these recipes because I felt like they would be harder to add into a vlog. A lot of the meals that I eat on there are either these meals or some variation of these. So if you ever want to know exactly what I'm cooking, you could just go back to this video and see what I substituted. So it makes it easier for all of us. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's video. Next week's video is probably going to be a Portland vlog because I am going to Portland and I kind of want to show you guys how I keep up with my training while I'm traveling. I did go on my Sunday long run today, which was 18 miles. So it's going to be a pretty easy go with the flow. Let's go on some hikes vlog. And I really hope you guys like it. And I hope I enjoy editing it, so we will see how that goes. Again, thank you so much for joining me for another video, and I will see you again next week. Bye!